G'day guys, welcome to the Pumped on Property show. It's great. I know we've been a bit slack lately with new episodes. This one today is an absolute cracker. Simon and I get into the nuts and bolts of our plans and a simple plan for financial freedom. But most importantly, we have a little bit of a rant, bit of banter, have a bit of fun talking about like this journey that we're on to the person that we're supposed to be.
But we also really get into the nuts and bolts of a specific strategy that you can use to create financial freedom in 15 years. We talk about exactly what we did at the beginning of our journeys to financial freedom and how that's shaped our situations today and how we can see how things are all going to unfold.
What I like about this one, bro, is we actually talk about like 3 properties that could be an ideal first investment, whether you're earning 50 grand a year or you're earning 500 grand a year, just as a starting point. And sometimes we don't get that prescriptive, but in this one, it's just super refreshing to talk about the 400 to 500K property, the 700K to $1 million property, or the affordable house and granny flat with exceptional cash flow. So I'm glad we went that deep because we normally sort of skim over that stuff.
Yeah, it's so true. And that's the hardest part, right? To figure out exactly what your next action step should be. So, talking about the overarching longer term strategy to actually replace your income or generate some decent passive income longer term, but also refining that back to exactly what needs to happen next to ensure that whatever you decide to purchase next will make sure that you're bridging that gap from where you are today to where you want to be in the future. So let's get stuck in. I'm pretty excited to unpack today's podcast and get into financial freedom in 15 years. But let's kick it off. How are you traveling on your journey to financial freedom?
Man, I thought I'd be there about 6 years ago, to be honest with you. I'm still working at it, man. It's taken a little bit longer than I was expecting. Like I remember at about 23 going, okay, cool. Like the way to get financially free for me is through property.
Yep.
And I thought at that time I'll get there by 30.
Yeah.
But I'm 36 years old now, and I probably could be financially free.
Closer to 37.
37. And I'd probably be there if my wife didn't want an expensive home to live in, which sucked all of the money out of all of my properties and into this place. But I think loving it as well.
Yeah, and all of those beautiful homes that you have lived in, have just been so nice. I think back to your place on the water and how many epic times that we had there and parties, and that was back in the day where we were shooting videos out in the sun out the back, and then you had your place close to the beach as well. So many epic parties at that house as well. It's so funny that they're all there for a reason. It's whilst financially they may not have helped you out, in terms of how you feel within yourself and connecting with family and friends and creating those memories. It's just thank God you did it.
100%. What I realize is that the version of myself that set that goal at 23 to be there at 30 only really cared about what other people thought, how I wanted to see myself, and this illusion of escaping it and just having choices forever, where my 36, 37-year-old version is more it is actually the journey that is the joy in all of this. You know what I mean? It's not about 100%. The destination at all.
I love that as well. And I think the exact same. When I first set my strategy in would have been 2017, maybe 2018, I was 24, turning 25. I wanted to do it in 10 years because I'm in a position to do it. I've got all of this support. I've got the right strategy. And then as I started learning more about myself and life and things like that, I realized that I needed to change it a little bit more, because same thing, I was being a bit selfish in setting those longer term goals, not thinking about a family. And then, once I met Tay and you talk about kids and the future and where you want to send those kids to school, the life you want them to have, it changes like that, right? 100%. And what I realize is, I'm happy for it to take longer because I want to, have a nice home because it's where I spend the most time in my life. I want to have a nice, safe environment to, live with my family in the future. And all of those things, I'm it's fine to delay the gratification of being financially free, but it obviously helps when I get to live my passion and purpose every single day, where I'm not trying to fight my way out of my current situation, where I'm actually just trying to be and learn more about myself and continue investing, but, you know, continuing to become a better version of myself as well. You know, a better brother, a better friend, a better son, a better partner, better fiance, a better father when that comes, a better investor, a better business person. Like, all of these things I want to become better at. And it's like, I'm going to be doing this until I'm like 80, 90 years of age. So what's the point of getting financially free in 10 years, you know?
100%, man. It's a funny thing, because I know a lot of you guys out there listening to this or watching this are at that point where I've certainly been and still am, which is on the journey. And so, you know, my question to you, man, is for those people out there just getting started that have been, you know, knocked onto the path or knocked off the path recently, like, how do we start? Like, how do we start this journey to, I want to be financially free, I want this sort of passive income in the future, and then what happens from there?
I think the first thing that we all need to do is sit down and think about what financial freedom actually means to us. Now, best place to start is probably replacing your current annual salary. I think that is achievable for the average person. I know there's a lot of really successful business owners that listen to this podcast that are earning really good money, and, you know, maybe they're not looking to replace their current annual salary. Maybe they're just looking to replace $100,000 or $200,000 worth of passive income. But you got to start with a number, and you've got to start with, you know, something that you're going to work towards. Now, that may change like it did for both of us as we started working through that journey, but having a clear, concise goal that you need to be working towards is the first place to start, because then you know what your next immediate action step is going to be. So it begins with thinking about where I am right now, where I want to be in the future. Now, if you want to replace your current annual salary, the reality is it's not going to happen overnight. It's probably going to be unlikely to do it in 5 years, unlikely to do it in 10 years. But I think for the average person, a 15-year time frame is quite achievable for the average Australian.
For sure. Like, I actually was cleaning out like my shed that we're filming in today recently, and I found a diary from, I don't know, like literally 2011 or something.
Yep.
When I was 24, and it said my goal is to replace $30,000 a year of passive income, because at that time my break-even cost in my life a week was $600, and I was like, man, how refreshing was that time looking back now. But it was also just starting with where you're at. And, you know, I think sometimes we get like overwhelmed by the steps in front of us to get from A to B. And so, you know, yes, I said a dollar figure, but most importantly, like, I sit down and I've done more and more of this the further I've got along, and I like create a goal, which is the financial dollar figure one. But then I sort of like just almost shut my eyes and visualize the life that I want. Now, for me, it has always been super simple. Like, Simon and I'm not like a Lambo dude at this stage, unless someone like wants to pay for one and drop it in my driveway. And maybe one day, like, who knows what's going to happen, you know what I mean, on this journey. But like, for right now, I just want the simplest things. Like, my dad, when I went down to Sydney last weekend, was like, we should all go to like a nice restaurant for a nice lunch. And I'm like, can we just go to like the Chinese bakery, like the Vietnamese bakery, and get a roll and a juice in the mall and chill on the beach? Like, I want the opportunity to drop the kids at school. Like, yesterday afternoon, I had to go to the physio, and then I was at home by 3:00. My wife had a headache. She went to bed. You know, I cooked dinner with the kids and spent all afternoon with them. I'm like, that is financial freedom to me. Like, that is choices, like, to be there when you can't be there in the past. And like, to train more, to surf more, to travel more, to take the pressure off yourself and get out of that constant survival mode. And it's like, it's so much more than the money now.
Yeah.
But the money is generally at the start what fuels it, or I either want to run away from my past and become something more, which it was for me, or I fucking am sick of my present and I want something more than this. And it's like, whether it's a pull or a push, take that motivation, and while it's there still, fucking run with it, hey?
Oh, 100%. I love that so much. And the best thing that I heard just there is you started off with saying you're not financially free yet, but you're already living your life that you want to be living.
100%.
You know, you've been able to create this lifestyle that enables you to live in alignment with your values and do the things that you love doing most, that fill your heart and provide you with the motivation that you need to keep working at those financial goals. And I think that's the coolest thing, because, you know, you're not at the end level of financial freedom that you're hoping to, but you've been able to create enough space, enough passive income to provide yourself with the time to do those things that are important to you. And everybody's going to have different things. You know, one of the guys that we work with, like, he loves training, he loves martial arts, and every single night he wants to get there and do it. And like, that's something that a lot of people could work towards, being like, I just want to make sure that I'm not stressed out so much to the point where I can't do the things that I love doing the most. And you need those things that kind of take you out of your mind and bring you into the moment to just forget about everything else, because all of those things are like the wires, the pulling factors that are going to get you through to where you want. And if you're not doing any of those things for you, then you're probably going to not get to financial freedom, because you're always creating a barrier between you and your optimal life.
You know, it's funny, man, because yesterday I got home at 3:00. In the last month, like, many nights I haven't got out of the office till 6 or 7 o'clock. So sometimes, like, I've heard feedback about us talking is like, it's like all well and good, man, that you're a little bit further down this path, but like, let's get real. And sometimes we forget to talk about like the sacrifices and what's really going on. Like, on this journey to financial freedom, it normally starts with not having a clear plan, not having a clear goal, not having a team of advisors or even a friend or mentor that you can bounce these ideas off, not having a community of supportive people.
Not having your why.
Not having a strong why. And when you don't have those things, when floods come into the media or a European crisis comes into the media or the stock market dips or interest rates are likely to rise, you can get blown around a little bit with the wind, where when you get to that point where you're like, I'm either trying to become something or I'm sick of how it is now. Like, I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired. Like, I'm sick and tired of being broke as like a concept and a way of living like week to week. All of a sudden, connecting to that goal and then having a vision of like what life could look like when you're there. So when it does get hard, something's pulling you through, and then getting to work. You know, in terms of like, I think the difference between the clients that we speak to, the friends that we speak to, the family members plus ourselves that get to where they want to be, it is cool. Like, I know where I want to be and I've got a vision, but what is the next action step? And you and I obsess about that one step at a time. You know, we've got clients that are like, I want to buy 5 properties this year, and they haven't even done the first one and they're talking about the 5th.
Yeah.
They've only got borrowing capacity to do 2. And I'm like, the joy of this, the joy of the journey is getting obsessed with that next moment. Like, can you borrow money? If you can, then you need to go into which market am I going to buy in? If I can't borrow money, it's hell simple. Like, you're saving.
You save and learn.
That's all it is, and it's a learning.
Every in-between phase, I try and focus on learning as well, because that's the majority of the journey. Like, that is the majority of it.
And 99.9% of it.
Yeah. And
I wish action lasted for longer.
Yeah, me too. Hey, it's the funnest part, right? Like, taking that action is fun, but it's also the scariest step as well. But I find like using those down periods where you are saving, or you're maybe waiting for your property to grow in value a little bit, or maybe you're waiting to increase your income. You know, all that's going to be the majority of your journey to financial freedom. And I like to just, you know, use that opportunity as learning. And then coming back to what you were saying about the difference between people that end up just doing it versus the ones that don't, is when I'm learning, like, you know, I get home from work or I wake up in the morning and it's a joy to turn on YouTube and listen to really smart investors, really smart economists or analysts. And like, that actually excites me and brings joy into my life, because the learning helps me understand how things are actually occurring, what is actually occurring around the world. Is what I'm hearing in the major media true, or is it just what they're talking about on that particular day? And having all of that helps me just stay on the path and stay focused. And then I can also compound that knowledge and that learning as well. So when I go catch up with friends or family, like, we can talk about this stuff. And if they're hooking onto those short-term ideas or short-term situations that come up that kind of give you an excuse to not do something, you know, you can actually use what you've learned to teach them something new so they can look at life from a different perspective to try and actually move forward and overcome that current fear or that challenge that they're facing in that moment.
You know, I think if I could speak to my 23 to 27-year-old self, I'd say it's okay to not know what you don't know right now. You know what I mean? Like, it takes time to build that foundation. So for me, with my personality, I'm one of those people from an education perspective that wants to understand all of the options before I reduce those options to a handful, before I reduce it to one. And if I look at my, you know, at the time I wasn't heaps satisfied with the work that I was doing. And so I was using property as my like creative outlet. And what I now realize from like buying a unit, buying really small piece of land and building on them, subdivisions, Airbnbs, renovations, buying and selling, losing money, making money, selling shit too early, holding it for too long, and trying everything under the sun in the property industry is, if I had have known what I knew now, I would have just tried to learn more about timing. Because, you know, had I bought and held a couple of houses in Sydney in 2011 until now, I would have, you know, these properties would be worth $2 million more than I paid for them.
You'd be financially free.
You know, had I bought, or had I, like, if I was starting now, like bought a couple of great properties in Perth or Adelaide or Brisbane and held them for the next 10 years, I'd probably be in a very strong position as well. Like, it doesn't have to be this crazy, crazy complicated journey that I thought it did. And, you know, half of our clients are like that. They want to try everything and they want to do everything and they want to make it fun and a part-time business. And the other half are more like, cool, like Hayden in our office, like, this is the plan. I'm going to execute the plan and then I'm going to get straight back to enjoying my life to the max.
I love that. And it's really...
Just spilt shit everywhere.
It's going to be there for the rest of the potty. Well, we'll just roll with that.
No shirt change here.
No shirt changes, no worries.
I fully missed my mouth.
And now I've forgotten what I was going to say. I find it so interesting that a lot of people want to do it, you know, that way, which is trying a whole bunch of different things. I think it's because, like, we naturally like to overcomplicate things. It's just the way that we are. We always try and, you know, catastrophize situations or try and do a lot, but we don't really do it in any other areas of our life. Like when you think about your job or school or something like that, it's like when you begin, you start with the foundations, you start with the fundamentals, you start with the easiest things, the pillars, the cornerstones, the building blocks. You always start with that. And then as you get more experience, as you learn more, you can then do unique things, and that allows you to increase your income. It allows you to maybe pivot into a new occupation or something like that. And investing in property is no different at all. You need to start with the foundations. You start with the basics. You start with the fundamentals that have worked, that have been tried and tested and worked time and time again. The good thing is there's so much historic data out there about what markets, what assets have performed the best. So you start with that, you start with the basics, and then once you've learnt more, once you've purchased a couple of properties, 2 or 3 properties, and you've built your team of advisors and you've understood the fundamentals, and you should now know from doing that how to identify the right markets at the right time, what suburbs within those markets you should be purchasing at specific times, what type of assets you should be purchasing in those markets as well. So you're increasing your knowledge, your understanding of property investing. And then what you can then do is, off that foundation, off that base level of knowledge and that asset base that you've got, you can then level up to the next level, and you can go for maybe higher risk, higher reward opportunities where you can, you know, tease your passions, like, you know, maybe do like a lifestyle project, whatever it might be. But you don't start with that. You know, you got to start with the basics. You got to learn how to do it properly first. And then from that base level of knowledge, you can then elevate into other opportunities. And I think about Hayden, he did exactly that. He started with the basics. He started with the fundamentals. He purchased those properties, and now moving into that consolidation phase, he's doing the right things. He's looking at other investment classes that might generate him stronger returns to try and pay down the debt on his portfolio a hell of a lot sooner, because he can now do that because he's been learning nonstop for the last 6 years.
I love that. I think about a really, really simple strategy to achieve this. And we've done a video and we've done a podcast on this, the 3 properties of financial freedom concept. But for those of you who haven't heard it, it's as simple as buying 3 high quality properties that could be whichever market you choose in Australia. For me, nowhere looks as good on paper to me as Brisbane right now. And that's why I'm personally investing here. But it could be somewhere else if you don't feel comfortable doing that. Let's say you buy 3 houses worth 500K. So you spent $1.5 million on the 3 places. Mm-hmm. And let's just say for ease of numbers sake, each of them rent for $500 a week. Now, in some markets, they'll rent for more than 5. In other markets, they'll rent for less. But that means we're getting $1,500 a week in income times 50 weeks a year is 75 grand a year today. Now, that would be like a foundation, and that would be the first step, accumulation complete. There's other things that we support people to do, like adding secondary dwellings, which can massively increase the rent return on properties and help pay off debt faster. But let's just say we did the 3 houses, rented the 3 out. Then we move to the second stage, which I'm in at the moment. It is honestly super boring, but the funnest stage as well, because it's like my mind is no longer spending 20 hours, 30 hours a week focusing on property. It is now focusing an hour a week on my money allocation so that I know that I'm working towards paying off debt. Now, in this stage, it's principal and interest. It's a little bit extra per week per property that you would have saved for a deposit. It's all the tax benefits, all of the surplus income. And for me personally, I've also bought other properties that I plan on selling down the line to create a chunk of cash after I've paid off my money to the government in taxes, and that chunk will help pay down debt faster. And then once you get past step 2, step 3, I'm yet to finalize, but it's choices. It's like, well, what if you did have 100 or 200 grand a year of income for life? What would your life look like? Would you continue to do what you're doing now, or would you use your skills for something else? Or do you just need a rest after working your ass off for 20 years and you want to do something else instead for a while?
I think it's so important to just have that strategy and have that plan. And, it may start as just a 3 properties to financial freedom strategy. But as you move through it, you may change and you might add more properties to it. You might change the style of assets that you end up holding. You can change, but you need to start somewhere because you need to start. You need to get this process started and get it moving, because the longer that you take to begin your journey to financial freedom, the longer that it's going to take you to get to phase 3 of that property investment journey, which is choices, lifestyle, doing what you want when you want. So just starting with the absolute basics and getting into the market with one quality investment grade property that will help bridge that gap between where you are right now to where you want to be in the future. You've got to start with that one, knowing that the only constant is change, and with some experience and with some growth, you can pivot in the future. You don't need to be stuck in the mud. You don't need to be set in stone. And just because your strategy might start out as a 3 properties to financial freedom strategy, it may not finish like that, but I'd say for the average person, purchasing 3 properties and working on paying them off as soon as possible, it's a nice, simple, easy, yet attainable and achievable way to achieve financial freedom. So, you don't need to overcomplicate it either.
I heard this epic quote once from Jim Rohn, and he's like, "You're not a tree. Fucking move." You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Life isn't stagnant. The only constant thing in the entire universe is change.
Yeah.
And things are in a constant state of flux. I think one thing that we rarely talk about is, I just want to do 3 examples of the type of first property or second property or first investment for someone that I think would be a great start. Now, we obviously know Brisbane. We've bought over $300 million worth of property up here.
Yep.
But I do like Adelaide.
Yep.
I personally wouldn't buy there because 75% of Australia's population, job and income growth is Brisbane, Sydney, Melbourne. And then there's Perth as well, which, Perth is cheaper to buy according to Core Logic than it was 13 years ago now. So there's great opportunity, and I'll use Brisbane, but the same type of opportunity might be available in Perth and Adelaide right now. So we work with 3 different types of people, right? But effectively, we all fit into the same category, and I'm actually all 3 of those people in terms of my current structure of my portfolio. So the first option is you've got around about a 400 to 500K budget. You just want to move into the market with a safe, quality property close to the city.
Yeah.
You want a quiet street, a nice big home, a tenant-ready, low-maintenance home. You don't want any bushfire or flooding or landslide issues. You want a nice big 500 plus square metre piece of land. Now, whichever one of those three markets you choose, you go in for 500 and you rent it for somewhere between 400 and 500 a week. It's a set and forget property. And theoretically, based on history, all three of those markets, with a 4.8% increase in the price over the next 15 years, should double the value of the property. So your 500 grand asset that you put 50 to 100 grand deposit down on or equity down on is worth $1 million in 15 years. And that's like the safest entry point for the average person just starting out.
Yeah.
But then a lot of our clients earn 100 to 500 grand a year as well, have big savings in the bank or have equity in their home or their investment, and they've got a bigger budget. So they go for more like the 700K to $1 million property right on the beach or very, very close to the CBD. And yes, because you've spent more, the rent return's going to be a bit less. Like you spend $1 million in Brizzy, you get about 650 to 800 a week in rent. You spend 700K in Brizzy, you get between 500 and 650 a week, depending on the suburb. But that is more like, I've got a bit more to spend. I don't want to load up on all of these properties. Like I'm that type of investor now. I don't want 20 properties. It's a headache. I want a handful of great properties. So I would personally, buying now, go for that option. And then there's the investor that wants to be a little bit more active like you and I. So let's talk about like a baseline granny flat sort of strategy there.
Yeah.
You know, you could go in at 500K again, rent for 400 a week, build your 200K granny flat. So you've got a total spend of 700 grand.
Yep.
And your granny flat will do another 350 a week in rent. So you're getting 750 bucks a week in rent from a 700 grand spend. And I think as a foundation, any three of those options is going to put you in a position where you've got choices in equity in the future and great cash flow as well.
And, you know, the rationale behind that particular strategy is based on history. Like, we don't like debt. We don't like having to go to the banks and say, hey, can you please give us some money and we'll pay you back double that over the next 30 years, basically. Like, it's
Don't
not
say that to me, man.
It's a sad reality, isn't it? But it is also a reality. So, you know, for us to feel confident with our investments and be able to just, you know, move forward, we look back at history and we analyze markets and we analyze the data and we talk to mentors and we talk to experienced investors that have been there, done that. And what we found is an article from CoreLogic which looked at the comparison between the 7 capital cities, so the 7 metro markets around Australia, against the 7 largest regional markets around Australia over a 20-year period. And 20 years is a much more realistic time frame for a property cycle. So over that period of time, the metro markets outperform the regional markets by 85%. So I'm not going to go and try and find that one random regional market that may outperform these major metro markets. I'm going to go with the safest option, which is where the people are, which is where the money is, which is where the infrastructure is. Then on top of that, CoreLogic also did another study that we've talked about both of these things time and time again, which is they looked at the comparison between houses versus units over a 25-year period, and what was found is the houses outperformed the units by 96%, almost 2 to 1 over that period of time. Now, that makes us recognize that the power is in the land, so we avoid purchasing units and townhouses and we purchase houses on nice big 500 plus square metre pieces of land. So all of that thing is confidence building. Now, the final step to that is timing. You know, how do I figure out which markets I should be buying in and when? And there was a great article, a great video that Jeremy Shepherd from DSR Data actually produced with Ryan from On Property, where they talked about the Sydney property market over a 20 or 25 year period.
I think it was 25 years. Yeah.
Over a longer term cycle. And what he found was that areas in Sydney that had performed very well in the first half of that 20 years had a reaction, and they essentially didn't do anywhere near as well in the following 10 years. But the markets that performed that underperformed in that first 10 years tend to perform quite well in the next 10 years. So looking at those 10-year average performance. Now, when I'm analysing data, if I see a suburb that's increased more than 6% per annum over the last 10 years, then I'm looking at that going, property prices are quite inflated in that particular market right now, in that particular suburb. I don't know if that's where I want to be buying. But if I look at a suburb and it's only gone up 1 to 4% per year over the last 10 years, and I'm like, hey, this one's underperformed in comparison to the longer term averages in this market. So maybe that's a better opportunity to capitalize over the next 10 years. So there's fundamentals, right? There's a process to actually getting this stuff started.
100%, bro. Like I found that article from Homely a couple of years back where they looked at 40 years worth of property prices from the 1970s till now.
Yeah.
And what we found from like overlaying Phil Anderson and Fred Harrison's work plus our own work is that Sydney and Melbourne seem to do better out of a GFC.
Yeah.
Or a major recession, and then Brisbane and Perth seem to do better in the second half of the cycle, which we're moving into now. And even within cities, like what I've found is that closest to the CBD and directly on the beach or the water perform better at the start of a growth cycle. Then, as you said, they're fully priced in halfway through. And then places on the outskirts, like I found a suburb last week that is 20 kilometres from Brisbane CBD that has grown by 2% per annum for the last 13 years straight. And I'm like, the suburb next to it, you can buy into this suburb for $400K. 3 suburbs up the road, people are paying $1.5 million and that suburb's grown by 8% a year. This is why I love this stuff so much.
Absolutely.
Because there is opportunity everywhere, despite what the media might be saying at any point in time. And there's only 2 media cycles, absolute joy and absolute doom. And it's like, you need to learn to interpret where we are in the overall global economic cycle. It's pretty tricky for the global economic cycle to just come to a screeching halt right now when there's more cash in the bank than there's ever been before. Yes, there's more debt as well. There's more infrastructure. There's more savings. There's more money in redraw facilities than ever before. There is population because
inflation
at the moment. Now, if you look at different asset classes against inflation, some stocks do really poorly, some stocks do very well. The stocks that do well are connected to the property industry, like banks, commodities, and real estate sort of trusts. And then if you look at property, it is one of the stores of value during an inflationary period of time. And what made property so hard to buy for my parents was when interest rates did get up to 17%, property was also going up by 17 to 20% per year. It was just slightly outpacing inflation. And that's why so many people got caught through that particular period of time. It's really, really interesting, as an investor that's looking to get financially free, to just understand some of these baseline things of okay, I need a goal, I need a vision, then I need to take action. Then once I've taken that action and built the portfolio, I need to pay off debt. And if you're interested in this stuff, listening to one of these videos every couple of weeks can really fill in the holes for you guys quickly, because we're going into so much detail about this stuff that you'll see very quickly over time the pattern, and that'll become your tool belt and your skill set to make better choices.
When I bought my first property, my first foundational property, I'd been working in real estate for 12 months at that point in time, 18 months. And I did know more than the average person, but at the same time, I knew nothing compared to what I know now. But I knew that action was the most important thing. And I didn't let my lack of knowledge stop me or hold me back from taking action, because you listen to people like Tony Robbins, Jim Rohn, Ray Dalio, Warren Buffett, and, the investor guys are it's about time in the market. So get in as soon as you possibly can. And then you listen to Jim Rohn and Tony Robbins, and they're talking about action is everything. You need to control your fate. You need to control your own destiny by taking the necessary action at the right time. So, I took what I knew at the time and just took that leap of faith. And thank God I did, because it's really helped. But just, as you were saying, it's you're the kind of person that wants to know everything before you do something. With this sort of stuff, sometimes you just got to be a bit woo-woo and just sort of trust the universe, trust the process, trust that it is all going to work out, and that's where it is good to be able to, lean on people for help.
Bro, we got such different perspectives, which I love. That's what makes us yin and yang. My approach is it's better to do one thing well than to do what I did and do 9 things okay. It wasn't until I bought about my 9th property that I really started to get into this shit. And I saw the houses versus units. I saw the metro versus regional. But not knowing anything, had I have just bought a couple of houses in Sydney after the GFC or a couple of houses in Brisbane at any point in the next few years, things would be very, very different. And it's so many people in Australia, because houses have gone up by an average of 8% per annum for the last 30 years and 9% per annum in Sydney, Melbourne, Brisbane and Perth for the last 40 years have worked out. I just think you guys are listening to us. It's taking a punt's cool. Having a little bit of an action plan for that punt's also cool.
Well, you still got to do the right things first, I didn't just go buy the property. I did learn that Brisbane was the right market. I created the strategy. I knew I needed to buy a house. I had my budget and I kept the
undervalued
purchase.
Part of the city, the undervalued street, the undervalued asset class in the suburb.
But I had no idea what that property was going to perform over the next 5, 10, 15 years. I never knew. I didn't know who was going to be renting the property out. I didn't know how I was going to execute the knockdown rebuild, because I was going to need equity and cash that I didn't have at the time. What I mean is, of course, you need to have the plan, but you also need to just back yourself and get in. And because a lot of people do create excuses to not do anything.
It's funny you say that, man, because in 2011, when I bought my first 2 houses, one in Sydney, one on the Central Coast, or unit and house, I didn't even know, this is so bad to say, that we'd gone through a GFC.
Yeah.
I was in uni. I had no idea what was going on in the world, because I was on Centrelink and I was still able to get a job in a bar. And I popped out and the entire Sydney market was freaking. I'd go to 12 open homes on a weekend and I was the only person.
Wow.
Is this just it? Where is everyone? But I didn't know any different.
So
I just thought no
properties?
One rocks up. And the agent would personally sit me in his car for 5 hours and drive me around. And I didn't realize that he had no one looking to buy it. And so when that little window came through in 2018, where the market spooked itself for a half a year, and when that same thing happened in 2020, when it spooked itself for about 9 months, and now that it's spooking itself again, it's these short windows represent ridiculous buying opportunities, because if you understand that these moments are short-lived, when these events are happening that scare people to sit on the sideline for a moment, but you understand that you're buying for 15 to 20 years, or that you've got another 5 years of run up in the current cycle, it's very exciting. It's just very difficult to stomach it. Remember when we both bought in 2020, how nervous and scared we personally were with our own money? Even though in the same year we bought 150 properties for other people, when I had to put my money where my mouth was, I'm not going to lie, I was shit scared.
Oh, yeah.
And it brought up a lot of anxiety. And my father-in-law, who was in the industry for 30 years, is I don't think you should, Ben. If I'd have listened to him, he would have cost me over $2 million of gains by now.
Yeah.
Across the 5 properties that I loaded up in during that last opportunity.
Yeah. It's so funny how things do end up working out. And, fortunately from the study and the research that you'd done, you knew that, it was a good opportunity to do that. You kind of understood where we were in the global cycle. And, there's times where you definitely don't want to. And the unfortunate reality is about a real estate cycle is the majority of people only find confidence once it's the wrong time. It's only the minority of people that actually capitalize at the right stages of the real estate cycle. And that's that contradiction there as well. It's just
the hardest part about this, bro, is as an investor to do well, you almost have to break away from the herd and become your own shepherd.
100%.
And it is freaking hard to do it, because we've got 100,000 years worth of wiring to say follow the tribe, because the tribe is safe.
Yeah.
But the tribe is also broke. And the system on top of the tribe is broke. And so it's where do you want to be? And what I realized at 20 was I wanted an unusual life. And I think almost everybody listening to this is looking for the same thing. if you're looking for financial freedom and choices, it's because you can see through the system and go, more of this or that isn't necessarily going to make me happier. And working until you're 70 isn't how it's supposed to be.
No.
Like, it was actually in the olden days, like, work was almost a dirty word. Like, and I don't mean that in a negative way, but it's like people worked until they were financially free and then they enjoyed the hell out of their lives. Like, I've been reading up and watching a lot of stuff on, like, the Dale Carnegies and the Rockefellers and stuff at the moment, because, like, these are some of the wealthiest people in history and they've written books and they've recorded stuff. And it's like almost all of them worked really focused and then got out of it early and were like young enough men to enjoy their lives. And it's like, I thought they just busted their ass till they died, but almost all of them retired in their 40s and 50s and just contributed to society in a positive way and spent the whole half of their lives donating money back, spending time with their families, looking after their health. And I'm like, where's that vision?
Yeah,
like,
it should
in
be
modern
there.
society, like, where are we to like work till we're 70 and just that's a badge of honor? Like, I get it and I love the meaning of work, but it is not my entire identity anymore. And I think there's a whole generation of kids coming through going, you sort of fucked that up, man.
Yeah.
And like, these kids are going to want something different, which is what we should have always had, which is choice and the ability to live our best life.
Oh man, that gives me chills. Like, that's a really interesting thing to sort of hear. And I believe that the constant drive for productivity, for innovation, for growth, like asset growth or business growth or, you know, making more money has been the driving force over the last 100 years, would you say, from the Industrial Revolution, probably?
Yep.
And that's completely changed the way that we operate. And now it is the 9 to 5, work until your retirement age and then, you know, live off your super, maybe end up on the pension. But it's just that it isn't promoting a happy life. Like, there's more and more people becoming depressed. There's more and more people becoming anxious. There's more and more people that are dissatisfied with their life. So you've got to have a really like open look at yourself and what you want to have in life and go, okay, well, what's normal, what people have been told to do clearly isn't breeding happiness and joy and choice and these things that we're talking about. So you're right, like, to achieve something that's not normal, you got to do something that's not normal. And that is, you know, going against the status quo. It's, you know, challenging the ideological norms of a lot of people. It's taking risks when everybody's telling you that it's a bad time to take that risk, or just like figuring out that plan and just getting it started.
You know, when I went, property is the thing that I'm going to do. Now, the reason I chose property is because it made sense, and also I can use leverage. Like, when I was 24, I could put $1 down and get $9 back. If I wanted to buy stocks, I could put $1 down and get $2 back. But they would, if the market went down by 30%, they would ask me for that money that was outstanding. You know what I mean? That was really scary. Like, I had friends of mine that were earning 50 grand a year at the time that were getting a margin call for 100K. Like, Damo, like, he didn't have the money. It almost made him sick. Like, it was so intense. And so when I chose property, that was the first step. When I started to take action, I felt invincible. And like, it started to put this like cloak of, I'm not in control of my life because there's so much going on with the universe, the world, and also like the economy that I have zero control over. So like, let it go. But what I can control is my ability to save, my ability to delay my gratification, my ability to buy what I could afford. My first property was $360K. My second property was $213. My third was $310. I get clients that are like, I want a property that looks like $1 million, but I've got $500K. Like, that $500K property, if well selected, will be $1 million in 15 to 20 years. And it's like, start where you are.
Yeah.
Buy the home that you can afford, like, and just that action creates momentum, and that momentum creates confidence. I was looking at this Matthew McConaughey quote, and also Will Smith, like, I'm reading Will Smith's book at the moment too. And he's like, there's this one thing, it was just so crazy. And it's like, the only way to actually build true confidence in yourself is to niche down, specialize in one thing, become successful in that one thing and then use that one thing to leverage up. And it's like until you've found that thing, and many people won't find it in work, but I found it in property. Fuck, it's given me everything. Like it's completely changed my life for the better. And I want that for the people watching this and listening to this. Like I want you to recognize what financial freedom as a concept can do, let alone like, fuck, $2 grand, $4 grand a week coming in, whether you get out of bed or not, which I'm still waiting for. But like,
we'll be
my
waiting.
vision is strong.
Yeah, we'll be waiting a while, and it's like, you know, the foundations have been laid. Like you can see how it's there, and that's what breeds a lot of that confidence, I think, and in everything, you know. And that's probably like what Will Smith is talking about. It's like once you've laid those foundations, you can actually see the forest through the trees. You can actually see the light at the end of the tunnel and how this is all going to unfold, because it's like the hard part's done. Now it's just about doing the consistency of paying down debt, of sacrificing, you know, delaying that gratification, making sure that you're allocating those funds to the right place.
And paying off debt slow, man. Like I'm in it at the moment, and it's like I thought this would go way quicker.
Yeah,
than it is. It's like, no matter, you know, if you're earning 50 grand or 200 grand, it's like a process.
Yeah, I saw a thing about that debt cycle as well, where it's like in the beginning, like once you've purchased these assets, you've got all of that confidence because you're like, oh, I've done it all. But yeah, you're right. Like as soon as that reality comes, like, oh shit, now I've got to pay off millions of dollars worth of debt. How am I going to do that? Because it ain't going to do it itself. And that's the hardest part about financial freedom. And that's probably one of the reasons why so many people don't get there, because, you know, staring down the barrel of 10 to 20 years worth of debt reduction, it's a long time.
For sure.
It's better than 50 years worth of work.
Completely, man.
For
like
some.
I'm so grateful for all of you guys on this journey. We just wish you all the best in it. Like it's going to take time. There's going to be days where like I've cried like hundreds of times, I reckon. I've stressed myself out to the point where like I got such chronic anxiety because I was trying to do it all too quickly that I went and saw a psychologist for years. Like I want you to know that it isn't all roses. You know, just when you feel like it's going well, the market can shift and your sentiment can move with the market. But if you can work through your stuff and you can learn to sit in the uncomfortableness of not knowing what's going to happen, but trusting that long-term it has always worked out, everything will change in the best way. And we really want that for everyone.
Yeah, for sure. I hope you guys have enjoyed today's podcast and got a few little gold nuggets out there, whether it's strategy, motivation, or just, you know, enjoying listening to our rants about financial freedom and life and choices and things like that. Because, you know, I've got that like limitless perspective on life, and I kind of feel as though I can do anything that I want if I'm willing to work for it. And that's the thing. It's like, you know, having that perspective, weighing up the pros and cons, is this risk worth the reward? And, you know, for me, 100% it is.
I love that, man, because our dad says like everyone, we're wired to have stress in our life.
Yeah.
And it's like, choose your stress.
Choose your stress.
Some people choose to like perform sport or training at a really high level. That's where they get it. They work really hard. I'm choosing for financial freedom and investing in property and saving money and paying off debt to be my stressor.
Yeah.
Now, I don't need to do any of this shit anymore, but I choose to do it because I can see how my life and the world will be as a result of hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands of people over the next 30 years consuming this stuff and changing their life for the better.
100%. Love it, man. Thank you for sharing.
Cool, bro. You too.
You.
Woo!
That's a wrap.
That's a wrap.
Getting
Have a
cool,
spin.
bro. Yeah. Oh, sweaty. So sweaty. Oh, that's good. Look at that.
So nice, eh?
Oh.